Dobrý večer, good evening. Hennadiy Maksak, welcome. Hennadiy is the president of a think tank called The Prison, and the think tank is dealing with foreign and security policy. And despite of his young age, he has already a long-standing career in think tanks and as an activist or civil society activist in Ukraine, but he will introduce himself alone, so I don't want to introduce all the details. But Hennadiy has studied economy and political science, and also I would say that he was in the steering committee of the Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum, which is a platform for civil society organizations of all the Eastern Partnership countries. So Hennadiy, 2 years on after Majdan, maybe you can introduce yourself to our audience in the context of the Majdan as a generation, Majdan generation.
Hello everyone. For me it's a great pleasure to be here just to share some of my observations. And if you
Mladší nebudu rozumět.
Dobre, nevadí.
Ну, я думаю, що на питання українською я зможу вам відповісти. When we referring Maidan or Revolution of Dignity, we see quite definite picture. And if to go retrospective, I would like maybe to remind you for a second what was the trigger for this Maidan. It began in 2013 in November when Yanukovych suddenly decided not to sign the association agreement. And so millions of Ukrainians just fled to the streets, and they said clear and out loud that we are for our European perspective. And it was the first sign. And I remember being in Vilnius when there was a Eastern Partnership Summit. We were staying with other Ukrainian activists and we were just proclaiming Президент слуга народу, підпиши з ЄС угоду, which means that president is a servant of people, so signed the agreement. But nothing has happened of a sort. So then was the crackdown on students on Maidan. And that is the point of no return for people to understand that we cannot tolerate the situation as it was. The real drama came in 2014 at the very beginning, in January, in February, when hundreds of Ukrainians died on the streets of our capital. So basically, it was from the very beginning about our European perspective, but then it just evolved in our understanding that we have the situation in country which doesn't reflect our expectations in terms of democracy, in terms of our freedoms, in terms of how we see ourselves and how our neighbors see our country. So it was about that set of values. And I think that many things has changed in Ukraine. I would like maybe to take 5 or 10 minutes just to show you a picture of 5 pillars, just to see other reforms in Ukraine and to see different facets of this process. The first and very indispensable part of reform track is political will. So after February 2014, after already annexation and, as we call, occupation of Crimea, and after situations with these illegal referenda on the territory of Ukraine. We had different kind of elections in Ukraine: presidential elections, snap presidential elections, and parliamentary elections. And all political actors were quite clear about European aspirations in their manifestations and in their political programs. They referred to association agreement, they referred to necessity to be more actively engaged in economic cooperation with the European Union, and so on and so forth. So on that background, we can see that, yes, political will was already manifested on that level, on that phase. The next very important thing for Ukraine, there was a shift back in our governing of the country. So basically from presidential parliamentary model, we came back to parliamentary presidential. That meant that we had to rely on coalition agreement. And there in coalition agreement, our European aspiration was also proclaimed even in preamble. And it was said that association agreement is a kind of Bible of reforms for Ukraine. And we should stick while planning the government plans what to do in the years ahead. It's a good story. It's a plus side. What we have a minus side. Unfortunately, those political parties that were presented on Maidan during this upheaval and during protests, they have deep roots in the old system. And sometimes not only roots, but only some kind of deformation of mindset, I would say. They tried to recruit young people, young politicians from the streets, volunteers from Majdan, those who were in the anti-terroristic operation zone. So they wanted them to be on their party lists. But mainly they used them to get more scores during elections. And that's it. It was not the new essence of political parties. And maybe you have heard about such kind of interfactual group in Ukraine, Euro-optimists. It's a kind of grouping, or caucus as they call themselves, from different political parties, predominantly young people who want to facilitate association process. And maybe this is the only part of pragmatic people which see the shortcomings of the process and which indicate it clearly. But with main parties, with main players, presidential party, Bloc Petra Poroshenko, and People's Front, we don't have a clear understanding that they want to have these reforms fully implemented in Ukraine. So there are two sides about political will. I want to be sincere, not to just make our Ukrainian outreach that everything is okay in Ukraine. No, we have problems, and so we should just demonstrate them to find common solutions to that. Another pillar, so one is political will. Another pillar is institutional capacity. Are we in position to deliver on our reforms plans in Ukraine? For example, those reforms that were proclaimed during Maidan, in our plans, and our commitments to European Union in association agreement? Yes. We had some good steps already done. For example, the main document, as I said, was association agreement. So there was another document for implementation plan for 3 years, and there are yet many documents how to implement every specific directive of European Union in our national legislation. This is a good side. And there was a special office created, which was called Governmental Office for European Integration. And there were different other offices or maybe posts created, for example, in each ministry which was related to the necessity of reforming the country under the association agreement. There was a post of Deputy Prime Minister for European, Deputy Prime Minister, Deputy Minister for European integration, just to make it more in a comprehensive way. What was not so optimistic about Ukraine, we had no clue how to do reforms in Ukraine. Just one little detail, if you happen to visit the website of National Reforms Council, there is a special institution created to facilitate this process, you will discover that we have 22 reforms at the same time to implement in Ukraine. Anti-corruption reform, law enforcement agencies, judicial system, and so on and so forth. So the process is difficult. But to go on this way, we should have experience. And that's why maybe we invited people from other countries, expats from Ukraine, or just citizens of other countries which accepted Ukrainian citizenship, to help with that. But this process was not so easy, and you know that there were some resignations of these politicians, all these functionaries from government. And there is another problem, middle-class bureaucracy. Even if there is understanding that this reform is vital for Ukraine, maybe on level of those middle bureaucrats or heads of departments, heads of units, there is a kind of resistance to the process. Because they do understand that with reforms already done, they might lose their position because they are not competent enough to work in other environments. It's also a problem for Ukraine at the moment. So it's the second pillar, pluses and minuses. The third pillar, strategic vision. If we see the way, if we see the ultimate aim, it's easier for us to understand what do we want. And I've already said that we have association agreement and we have implementation plans. But what is the problem with this strategic vision? That not always these plans are implemented in time. Sometimes it's difficult because of the problems mentioned above, about political will or about capacity of institutions, but sometimes it's also unwillingness to be fully involved in the process of planning and just executing this strategic vision. The first, most promising, I would say, pillar for Ukraine is involvement of civil society. As civil society was the driving force for this Maidan, or revolution of dignity in Ukraine, many of these young people, not young, but very optimistic about their future, they joined institutions. They created different platforms to facilitate the process of reforms implementation, to consult, to monitor. Just to name a few initiatives. One is reanimation package of reforms, or emergency package of reforms. This initiative is a horizontal network which unites around 300 of experts from different think tanks, advocacy organizations, other NGOs, which are united in 25 working groups devoted to specific reforms. And they do propose their own draft laws on reforms track. Some of them are successful, some of them are less successful, but still I think it's a great success story for Ukraine to have such kind of initiative. And there are many others, not to just take a lot of time in enumeration. And the fifth, which is quite vital for reforms and for our success or for our state of play in reforms implementation, is international support. I just put aside the Russian aggression. I will refer to that international aid that helped Ukraine not to go bankrupt in 2014, 2015. EU assistance was crucial for Ukraine. And those figures, maybe 2.2 billion of macro-financial help with some other assistance from IMF, they really help Ukraine to be not on knees, but on its feet. It's very difficult economic-wise, because you know that except for drop in economy, just little figures that with having that part of Donbass and Crimea cut from our economy, we lost around 20% of our GDP. It's a great drop even on that side in our economy. Not to mention a lot of finances allocated to our defense sector. So this financial support was crucial. What is on the bad side, I would say, it mostly relates also to Ukrainian politicians, which are not so easy to be sincere while dealing with these finances. And there are, not a lot, but there are cases already with evidences that those sums are not always allocated correctly. And that is always the problem. So basically, the state of play. Is it different? Yes, it is. Because we feel differently. We are in the mid of the process, I would say. To have these 22 reforms at the same time, it's not an excuse not to do that, but it's, believe, when you're in war, it's very difficult to go with the step you planned from the very beginning. And I think that we have achieved a lot, and we still have to achieve it. So maybe I stop here, not to take time on my lecture, and we will talk in format of discussion.
Yes, please. I think we have finished this kind of Brussels talks when you were trying to defend your country, and now maybe we can come back to some kind of more personal talk and questions related to the civil society and to the work you are doing, and maybe the views how you see the developments in Ukraine. I will start with the recent events since the new government. And maybe before I talk about it, I will just quote from the International Republican Institute's recent poll, which was done just before the regional elections in November 2015, where 68% of Ukrainians said that they believe that the country is going in the wrong direction, and 87% said that corruption and nepotism are the greatest problems they are facing, mainly on the regional and local level. Since 14th of April, you have a new government, which the world sees and calls as a kind of facelift, because everyone knows that the new prime minister is close to the president, was the speaker of the parliament, was a minister before, so it's not a new face. Despite of that, the Euro-optimists and the civil society is still being optimistic, and they still say, yes, now we will make it, now we are going to achieve it. Are you also optimistic? What is this optimism kind of believe that we have the last chance and we have to believe it, or do you see reasons for this optimism, and if so, if you can elaborate on that?
Those figures are surprising, but maybe not for Ukrainians, because the state of corruption, recent polls show it's not a diminishing process. It's somehow even rising, and it raises some concerns because actually we see some steps already done, and even some steps done with help of civil society. But maybe on the middle of the process there is a kind of block we should overcome maybe in the days, in the months to come. So I think that corruption is the first and for the most reform, anti-corruption reform is the first and foremost reform to be done. As you referred to new government of Ukraine, it's too early to say about its quality. Maybe first 100 days would show the essence and change of the approach to the situation. The two governments we had since 2014, before elections and after elections, they did a lot. They did a lot to form Ukrainian army from the very beginning. And at the moment, on the contact line, we have a parity of our military capabilities. It's already a good sign. It's already a kind of our resilience and is deterrence, not to get Russians involved in more active military activities on other territories of Ukraine. But there are obvious shortcomings when it comes to some economic situations, some drawbacks in other reforms in other sectors. So actually, we are quite optimistic about new government in a way that the crisis is overcome. Because when you have war in Ukraine, when you have parliamentary crisis, your coalition is just split. When you have a government which is not active to the full potential because everybody wants Yatsenyuk to go down, to resign, it's not a good way to provide domestic policy. So the crisis already overcome, and we see that there is a platform to go on with reforms. There are some signs even that the dialogue with society could be better, because from the very beginning, Prime Minister Groysman gathered activists which were involved in this process of consulting on reforms and asked for a renewed plan how to make it more efficient together, jointly. We'll see. Maybe the first 100 days will show us.
Okay, so you believe that there is a reason for optimism.
We have to believe.
Maybe let's stay on the reform, because another aspect of fighting corruption, which, I mean, there are certain reasons why people believe that Groysman might be more successful than Yatsenyuk, especially because he's also, I mean, he's closer to Poroshenko, so there is no fight between the two men, which we face until now. But let's stay on reforms, because the second most important and maybe the most discussed reform is the decentralization reform, which has a kind of shadow element, which is Minsk agreement, because many Ukrainians believe that the decentralization reform is actually implementation of Minsk, which they don't want to accept. And I wonder, Groysman, as a speaker of the parliament, he wasn't able to convene a majority, or not majority, constitutional majority, which is needed for these reforms. So do you think, as a prime minister, he could have a leverage on the parliament to deliver on this, or what do you believe that this is? Or I mean, is this going to? I mean, is the parliament going to be able to maybe also persuade the population of Ukraine that this is not only about implementation of Minsk, but actually decentralization is vital reform in order to move forward in economic and any all terms, and also building the state which is failing?
Very interesting question and very tough one, because I would say that Groysman was the father of the decentralization reform. He tried to set the motion during his being on the post of the vice prime minister. And he was quite successful because he has his managerial capacities to gather a team and to draft a kind of plan what to do. And when he just was shifted after elections to parliament, it was a bad sign for this decentralization reform. Because actually, as is put by prominent Slovak Mr. Miklos, that every reform should have a leader. He was the leader of the reform. So without this leader, something was done, actually, and I must admit that there are some pilot regions or districts in Ukraine where this new mechanism of living decentralization is already applied, just to see what happened. But there are some other moments to be implemented, and you rightly point out about these constitutional amendments. What I see, it would be difficult in this way to have constitutional majority to have these reforms done in that way if we are obliged to do with some specific status for Donbas region. Because of political reasons, because we don't see enough ground from other sphere why it is the bloc is for this reform. I think that it is also very important to mention that this reform is imposed on us. Minsk agreements, they were concluded under pressure, and Russia is not part of this agreement, but still some moments are put into this document about our domestic policy. And we have this trilateral group gathered in Minsk contact group, to decide on political issues, on elections in this territory. We are pressed to make decisions which counter our national interests. So,
do you really? Because that was actually my question. That it seems that the society believes that the whole decentralization reform is only about Minsk, but actually it's not. I mean, every country, Slovakia had to go through this reform, Poland, all the new member states practically, and the whole reason for the reform it's to go to the subsidiarity principle, which is the basic principle for every democracy. So how would it be possible to distinguish these two things and kind of move away the political feature of the decentralization reform and help Ukrainians to believe that this can bring something positive? I understand that the whole, I mean, the Donbas and I mean the eastern Ukraine problem, it's still there, and no one knows how to solve it. But on the other hand, I mean, we cannot hijack, because otherwise you will let the war to hijack the whole reform. So my question is like in what way the new government and the parliament is going to deal with this challenge?
I think that there is a great understanding that this decentralization reform is not only about Minsk agreements, it's not about special status to Donbas area, occupied territories of Donbas, but you ask about constitutional majority. And because of that, it would be extremely difficult, even if there is one party president and prime minister, to generate constitutional majority of 300 votes. It would be extremely difficult. Not with this parliament, I would say. Mm-hmm. So, but at the same time, some steps will be done, for sure will be done, and maybe would be not about just constitutional amendments. It would be about some practical steps. How to make these territories more vital and more coherent in their needs and in generating maybe income from other sources, not only subsidies from the center. It's already done on these pilot territories. There are 160 districts, rayoni, as we say in Ukraine, where these new realities are already in place.
Mm-hmm. So you believe that the regional and local and regional authorities will gain more political power?
Yes, exactly.
In a different way, not through the kind of general constitution.
There are new signals already that there is a new impetus to this movement with decentralization, because there is enhancement of the capacities of reforms offices in region which deal with decentralization, with a very interesting campaign, with just explaining why it is important for the communities, because those people which now lead these communities, they're against this reform, because they lose their powers over land, over other incomes they have illegally. They oppose, so we are to do it just in communication with people of these communities. And we are already doing this process, and there is a great assistance from European Union, and we are just thankful for that. So I think the proposal will be visible. It's because of Grossman, it's because his team would be more efficient in that. But I would argue it would be extremely difficult to put these amendments to constitution because there are two parts of it. And if you put the next part of misagreement is quite difficult politically to deal with.
Okay, thank you. Let's stay with reforms and maybe bring it into the European context, because you just mentioned the European Union and its support. And some years ago, there was a leader from the Balkans who said that, enlargement and reforms, practically, we know that the European Union is not interested very much in enlargement, so we pretend we do reforms, and they pretend that they are open to enlargement. So, what is that was years back. Now the situation is even more difficult. Europe and EU is facing more challenges than a few years ago. Ukraine is facing more challenges than the Balkan countries, because that was after the war in the Balkans. But Ukraine is still facing a war. Ukraine is facing a failing state. How do you see the EU-Ukraine relation in terms of reforms? Do you think that the pressure from the EU is enough, or it's too big? The request of doing 22 reforms at the same time, do you think that it's manageable, or it's just a kind of bureaucracy in Brussels which go and do the screening and they say this law has to be reformed without having the general picture if the country is able to run so many reforms? And there is also this clause, because obviously, now with certain reforms, EU was reluctant to give more money to Ukraine because, especially in relation to the corruption, the failing of diminishing corruption in Ukraine. Do you think this is a way? Because the EU approach to the Eastern Partnership is this more for more, that if the countries deliver more, EU will give more. You think this is a right approach, or you will suggest something else? And also in terms of the kind of general maybe membership perspectives and visa liberalization, like where the relationship stands?
If you allow me, I would like to start with a little story from my recent past discussions. We had the publication on Eastern Partnership and what we see as possible points how to enhance its effectiveness. And there was a presentation in Berlin. And
which is the center number one of the
center number one, and it was quite specific in terms of how we see the situation and how was the expert vision from another side. And one maybe extreme idea which is opposed to mine, that was just voiced by one expert who said, okay guys, you are talking about some imaginary things, imaginary benefits of these European integrations, but come on. When there was Yanukovych and you were just in friends with Russia, there was no war in Ukraine. Your economy was quite good. So what is at stake? Why you are trying to be so active in European direction? And my answer was, it's quite easy to be in that kind of relation with Russia because it is corrupt way. Because Russia trying to make friends with energy, with economic, with other tools, where the corruption is the indispensable part of that. And they do not want and they do not ask to reform the system. Then ask us, stay as you are. While in European direction, we're asked to improve ourselves. So what's wrong about policy from Brussels, if I could just estimate it from my Ukrainian perspective? I see three basic flaws. The first one, it's the open-ended approach of Brussels. So actually, there is a kind of saying when Russia says it's very difficult to propose, it's very difficult to reject. When European Union says it's very difficult to understand. So actually it was about policy of partnership or policy of bilateral relations with European Union. What was the ultimate aim of this cooperation? Are we just dealing with reforms and we have some money instead of that? Or is there a kind of perspective, not this year, not in 5 years, in 10 years, but perspective of membership? Because it's a kind of motivation, and you in Slovakia, you do know that it's the right way. So this open-endedness was a problem, number one. Problem number two, it was underestimation of Russia's resolve to be active and to counter to activity of European Union in this territory. From the very beginning in 2009, when this Eastern Partnership, I believe all of you familiar with this term and this policy, was launched in Prague, there was a special clause about cooperation with Russia. Russia was also part of this policy, but they rejected. And they said it quite clearly that we perceive this policy as a threat to our interest in this near abroad, as they say. So, and this resolve to act with energy, with economic tools, with military tools was underestimated by Brussels. The third one, it's about Ukraine already, underestimation of flexibility of post-Soviet elites in our countries to promise that, okay, we will do that, with reforms, and not to deliver on these reforms. This flexibility was a part of the existence in between, like evolution between Russia and European Union, but it's no longer sufficient to be somewhere in between. And now I'm coming to my suggestion of what to do. Yes, there is more for more. It's a kind of reality, but less for less. If you committed to these obligations and you do not deliver, please see that there is limitation even to those we already promised to you. I think that could be a kind of remedy to the situation with corruption to make it more flourishing in Ukraine. And also there should be remedies or changes to first two flaws which already are in this policy of Eastern Partnership. If these three flaws or mistakes are addressed properly, I think the situation could change.
Thank you very much. I mean, the comment on the EU membership, I think it was a kind of widely shared, and especially it was opened before the last European elections, when many EU leaders actually were trying to avoid the question, or actually said that they don't see any new memberships in, I don't know, 5-10 years, which practically was unnecessary, because the EU treaties are very clearly stating when a country is welcome, and obviously, I mean, if the conditions will be fulfilled, then the EU has to start with the procedures. So, but let's come back to the issue or Russia issue, and I don't want to discuss the EU-Russia relation, but maybe from there is a lot of written about the Ukraine-Russia issues, and I don't want to go into this geopolitical context, but more maybe into the kind of cultural or the question of identity of Ukrainians. Do you think that the war has changed the culture and identity of the country? But there are many people who are saying that it has actually unified the country and the society. Do you feel that way? I mean, maybe from your own perspective or your family perspective, or you mentioned before to me that you have been traveling all around Ukraine, so maybe you have some, I mean, you remember some stories and what people were sharing with you, their stories. So maybe if you can share something with us.
You know, on personal level, it's still very difficult to communicate with Russians, I mean, for Ukrainians. Even when we have relatives, our beloved in Russia, when we spend half an hour in one premises, maybe with some spirits, just to make discussion more active, it comes. I feel with the Holy Spirit. Yeah. It comes to the different perception of the situation in Ukraine, and just to make it more general, just for one moment, there is an opinion poll conducted in Russia by Levada Center, in Ukraine by our Ukrainian poll agency, and it is saying that only 25% of Russians see the situation between Russia and Ukraine as war. In Ukraine, we have around 70% of that. Only 10% of Ukrainians see that Crimea belongs to Russia. And about 80% in Russia sees it as a right way that Crimea was occupied.
So that means also the Russian speakers in the eastern part of Ukraine do consider... Crimea as a part of Ukraine?
I think...
or how this poll was done? Was it done also on
done
occupied
all
territories?
over Ukraine,
or?
but it is very difficult to provide this poll on the occupied territories. So it was done... it wasn't done in Crimea, it was done in occupied part of the Donbass. But still, I think that we are quite different in our approaches to this situation, maybe because of the information. Because propaganda works, and it works quite effectively in Russia, in our country even. But if you're talking about Ukraine, what is good after these 2 years we experienced, that this shift between our differences, there was a kind of 50-50 or just a split in the middle of Ukraine, pro-Russian and pro-European. Now this shift is moving eastwards. So the part of Ukrainians which see the necessity to be part of the union with Russia, with Belarus, with these other countries is diminishing. And part of those who are in favor of European integration is rising. At the moment, 53% are ready to vote for membership of Ukraine in European Union, and only 17% for membership of Ukraine in Customs Union or Eurasian Economic Union. So actually it is. When it comes to Crimea and to Donbass, they were different from average territories of Ukraine, even those neighboring territories. For example, Donetskaya and Luganskaya oblasts, they were different from Zaporizhia, from Dnipropetrovsk. And maybe this is the reason why Russia failed with kind of injecting the situation in these regions. And Crimea is different. For example, you ask about language. Before the crisis, before the occupation of Crimea and that part of Donbass, there was a question asked to this population. And what do you need and what are the problems? In Crimea, the problem of language was number 4. In Donbass, it was number 16 or 17. It was more pragmatic. But still, it differs. Ukraine is too big not to be different. But I think that some differences are just evaporating. For example, I would assure you that Russian language is not a marker of identity for Ukrainians. For example, I'm living in northern part of Ukraine. If we're talking sociological terms, it's a central part of Ukraine. In my family, with my wife and my kids, I talk Russian language. With my parents from countryside, I speak Ukrainian language. There is no problem. Kids in school, when they have lessons are taught Ukrainian language. When they are on breaks, they talk Russian language. It's not in part, it's central part. So there are no differences, just perceiving if you're speaking Russian, you're not Ukrainian, or vice versa. And I think that what also is suggested by recent polls, that optimism about Ukraine in the future is risen without any regard to language you use for daily communication.
The IRI has also done a poll. It was just actually before the annexation of Crimea, where it was done in the eastern part of Ukraine among the Russian speakers, and there was 85% of Russian speakers said that they don't see any problems of being Russian speaker or any threats coming from the fact that they speak Russian. So it seems that the language issue was really used by different media as a reason for the war or for the conflict, and obviously, the numbers show something different. But maybe I will kind of come back to my question. So do you believe that the war has, because you provided some data, but data is one thing and another thing is kind of feeling in the society. So do you think that the society is feeling more united now because of the war? Or what are the moods in terms of identity and feeling Ukrainian or feeling citizens of Ukraine? Because obviously you don't need to be having a Ukrainian nationality.
Not to bore with other figures, I would say that yes, tendency is that population is more united. Still, the situation differs from region to region, in the west and east, in figures, but still this process is going upward. And it's a good tendency, I think, because they think about Ukraine as a sovereign state, they think about Ukraine as a separate state with its territory, with its sovereignty, and so on and so forth. By the way, just to get back to those polls in Ukraine and Russia, the main mindset which differs, it was put by one expert so that in Ukraine we have weak state by very strong civil society. In Russia, they have very strong state by weak society. So perception of Russians that state is the main actor to deal with the problems of population, and they should obey by the rules, abide by the rules that state is providing. In Ukraine, we are more anarchists in that way. Maybe it's because from our historical background, when our statehood was just taken away and we were under ruling of different empires, under Soviet Union and so on and so forth. So actually, we are more trying to rely on ourselves, not on state. And that's why we are always reluctant to give our confidence to state and to institutions. And it's also kind of feature of Ukrainians that we always say that we do not believe to our institutions, state institutions, to power, to president, to prime minister, and so on and so forth.
So Ukraine is a very libertarian country.
Yeah.
Maybe you should give some examples to the Americans. But I would like to stay on the civil society and maybe also share some of my own experiences or observations that when I went first time after Maidan to Ukraine, I was really amazed by the amount of young people who have given up their very good jobs in different international corporations and live out of saving and are writing different analytical papers and trying to help the government and support the government. So it is an incredible, vibrant civil society, especially in Kiev, I must admit, where the kind of intellectually and young people who studied abroad and who have different experience and know how things work in different countries. So that, for me, this picture was really amazing, because when I look back in the past of when Slovakia was going through the reforms, I mean, we had no people with so many young people who were studying abroad, spoke the languages, had lots of experience, and were ready, and that's kind of what I would want to stress, were ready to give up their highly paid jobs for their country. But I wonder, now it's 2 years on, and everybody could see that things are not moving forward as quickly as people would like to. Corruption is still a huge problem. Do you think that the people and the society will be able to resist this and kind of keep the optimism and give the support to this new government? Or do you feel that the optimism is maybe will still now kind of reason with the new government, but maybe in general has a declining tendency?
Well, actually, optimism is there, and as I mentioned already, that there was a kind of meeting with Prime Minister Groisman of our public and activists and civil society experts.
Do you think that the civil society will give a higher say to the reforms now than before?
It's not higher, but still optimism is there. I would put it in that way, because actually we have to believe. You're right about those young people with prominent, brilliant careers abroad who just abandoned their work and so on and so forth, and come to Ukrainian institutions when they have some thousands of euros salaries there and they have 200 euros here. They live on their savings, you're right. But these savings are just scaling down. And there is a kind of, not resentment, but they do not understand how they could feed their families at the moment. But they're still staying. I'm not sure about the way, how long they could stay, but there is still optimism and belief that something could happen and our reforms would just belong to more stable track.
Do you think that because the EU has recently started, a couple of years ago, but in terms of the Eastern Partnership and neighborhood policy, the support to civil society has been supported much stronger. I mean, before the relationship was more between the EU and the governments, but a couple of years, I think it was about 5 years ago, actually, yes, it was after the Arab Spring, where the when the European Union has realized that it did not have any means to support civil society in countries which were seeking democratic path, and that was also transferred to the Eastern Partnership. So do you think the system is done in such a way that, for example, these people who are living out of their savings and the savings are running out, is the system kind of flexible enough that can support these kind of individuals who are a hope of the country for the future? I mean, you were also part of the Eastern Partnership Civil Society platform, so you had the space also to communicate directly with the EU. So how would you evaluate this relation and the whole civil society support of the EU?
I would maybe reiterate once again that we are very thankful to European Union for their support, because actually many initiatives are just supported by European Union. You mentioned this national platform of Civil Society Forum of Eastern Partnership. It is also supported by European Union. And maybe such kind of initiatives, they could be sustainable in future, but now they are indispensable with some outside support to give more expertise, to give more resources to institutions. Be it human resources, be it kind of expertise I already mentioned. So actually I think that European Union is on the right track. We can also ask for more, but I think even this kind of assistance is already working for our Ukrainian interest. But I would say that there is another reform, public administration reform in Ukraine, which is ongoing, and it was planned that from the April or maybe later months, the new law on public administration would be enacted, and it could change in terms of salaries, it could change in terms of political decisions, and in terms of just filling the jobs in institutions. I think that the promise is still there.
So the new civil service
new law
would kind of help the civil
because
society,
it's already done on some European basis. Yeah, and we have some political. What was the problem with civil service in Ukraine, and what is still the problem with civil service? That many higher positions are occupied by people loyal to political leaders of big political parties. And if once they are entering maybe parliament, they're trying to make compromises with other parties where they have leaders of oblasts, of districts, and of courts, and so on and so forth. New laws gives another system. There should be an open call for new faces, and it would be just...
So who can guarantee that it's open and it's
well,
not corrupted, the whole process of recruitment?
At the moment, we should try from the beginning even to make it open, not to be appointed from the cabinets of politicians. Maybe that's the point. So actually, I think that there are steps. It's very difficult because, once again, referring to Mr. Miklos, another point, except for leadership for reform, there should be communication strategy. I think communication is a weak point of our authorities. They are not good enough in even just presenting what they have achieved. Even Yatsenyuk, when he was stepping down his office, he delivered a bunch of good things he already done. But it was not visible enough during his time in government. So actually, to be more visible with reforms, I think it's also a part to be more successful with reforms.
The governor of Odessa has a good experience with communication, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's good in communication, but yeah.
Maybe one more thing to share, and maybe ask on how do you see this part of the element? Because another area where I realized how strong the civil society in Ukraine was, it was 8 months after the war in the east has started, and the government, there was that time I think nearly 2 million internally displaced people in Ukraine, and the government was the government was falling apart, there was no really support, and these people all survive and all live somewhere, have some food, some clothing, and which was provided by the fellow citizens. And most of the time, the citizens from the western Ukraine, because the people from the east fled to the west, so there were people who spoke the other language and who were supposed to be their enemies. How is the situation now, and maybe from these enormous efforts of the civil society, like where do we see the other fruit, or where can this, because obviously, what we were discussing before, it's the civil society is mainly in Kiev, so it's the kind of close to the governments, close to helping the reforms, but then these people who are helping the IDPs, they are in the different regions. It's people in small cities, villages, who offer their houses, offer their kitchens, owners of hotels offer rooms. So is there any structure which is helping to sustain this enormous potential, or it's completely lost? I don't know if there is any even effort to map this.
As far as I recall, at the end of the last year, the year 2015, there were 1,500,000 plus IDPs officially registered. And from this number, 1,200,000 families. So actually it's a great figure, and I think that for me it's very difficult to say that state is efficient in addressing the needs of these people because of the lack of some resources, because of the little experience to live in these circumstances. But some steps have been already done, I would say. On state level, there is a special ministry which is in charge of the giving assistance to the IDPs. And there are a lot of initiatives on regional level, how to just embody them in local communities, how to give them tools to be more active as entrepreneurs. So I think that some things are done, but I think there should be a greater effort jointly with the European Union, with other international partners, because I think Ukraine is not in position to deal with it on its own.
Of course, the European Union is having lots of challenges with 1 million refugees we have from the Middle East, and Ukraine has the same amount or even higher amount internally. So we understand that this is a huge challenge. I would maybe now move to the question parts. Questions not coming from me, but maybe open the questions to the audience. I think that there are also some Ukrainians among us, so if they are, I don't want to prioritize them over other people, but then obviously, it will be great if you can maybe give your answers and positions on some of the questions which were discussed before, but we will welcome you, but I don't see very much because of these lights. So there are lots of hands. There is one, yes, please. Are there microphones?
Hello, I'm one of Ukrainians, and probably I would like to share my own experience because I'm also from Crimea and I'm Russian speaker Ukrainian. So about this problem and division that people about the language was totally artificial since the beginning. And the biggest problem was that our politician, Ukrainian politician, long time was using this argument in their fighting for election. So basically, Ukraine was divided by Ukrainian politicians, for the first of all. For example, I was studying Russian always, and when I need to defend my postgraduate thesis in Kharkiv, they let me do that in Russian language. It was no problem to do that. And after that, when we read, for example, when this, I would like to say, hysterica about stress about to be a Russian speaker in Ukraine was increasing in Crimea among my friends and colleagues in university. They start making a lot of complaint that we are Russian speaker, we cannot be successful in Ukrainian, for example, scientists in universities and institutes. This was not totally not true. And there are a lot of examples against that. But the biggest problem that, unfortunately, I have to say that a lot of problem which we are facing now was created by our own people, by our own, I would like to say, basically politician. For example, I wouldn't agree with you that Groisman was the beginner of decentralization reform. Since 1992, our first law of local authority was totally in touch with European standards. But because of instruction, because of under law rules, it was not able to be like this. So, yes, the country was very weak, country was very young, and country needs to build the authority. All time, country was building authority by limited local authority. For example, Crimea. It was 8 cases in Constitutional Court, which Crimean Parliament applied as one of the subjects to apply for the Constitutional Court process. None of them was won by Crimea. It was before annexation. So, yes, Russia make a big deal, but unfortunately we have to say that we try to get our country stronger, but we make our country more weak because of this centralization authority. And of course, Russian and another circumstance wouldn't miss a chance to use that. Basically, my question to you is about decentralization mostly. How you feel real practical steps about decentralization of, first of all, fiscal resources and resources of local authorities? Is it able to make now? Because for me, the point of Donbass is not the main point, which for sure, if we will put like this, we will never find the answer because all society will against that. But I wouldn't say that all society will be against to concentrate their power in the local authorities among all the country with the same level of independency like Donbass supposedly will have. So that's probably will be the answer how to fix that and find some agreement between the people. Thank you.
Should we collect some or just answer?
Can you once again raise how many questions we have got and then we can make a decision if we collect one? I think we are fine now. We can take one by one.
First of all, I'm glad to see you, Anna. On decentralization, yes, it's not the first initiative of Groisman. He's not the father of decentralization. But if you're talking about these 2 years after 2014 and what has changed, he was maybe at the helm of this initiative. And actually, all the experts from Slovakia, Slovak Republic, from Poland, who came to Ukraine, he was the contact point for them, just to decide what is more adequate for Ukrainians to adapt in terms of this decentralization. Is it possible for local authorities to implement and how it is seen from the regional and local level? I would say there are two main groups already mentioned. Those who already are a part of the head of communities and the heads of some kind of councils which have some authorities over the property, over land. They are strongly opposed to that. If we're talking about communities and people which are not aware of this reform and their possibilities, more efforts should be streamlined to work with them. And actually those reforms offices, they're trying to do this sort of work. Are they sufficient? I don't know the poll or survey which indicates the positive dynamics, but I think that it's difficult questions from political point, from political will, you already indicated, and it's a difficult point from institutional capacity. What could be done at the moment on the regional level and on the level of those communities which are to live on their own. They've been afraid that they would be cut of subsidies, they would be cut of assistance, and they have to live just overnight. You have to live on your own, and you do not understand how you could generate the revenues, how you generate the incomes for your community. They are not trained for that. So actually, it's not a problem of even 1 year or 2 years. It's a problem of generation just to get accustomed to that kind of activity. And I remember the activity under Besmirny. Maybe you also know of his efforts. He was very active during 2005, 2006, 2010, but the problem is institutional capacity. and political will was the major one not to put it on motion. This is my vision, as I see it.
Can I just one small question? So just to finish that. Can you believe in this prefect reform when the people from President strict will be on our regional level, replace it for the people who will represent local authority? Is it the next step from point of view for making this reform for better?
So actually, as far as understood, is this kind of prefect structure is good for local authorities? I think it's quite a copy of those systems which are already in place in different countries in European Union. And when you have good oversight of the system, for not being abused by presidential authorities, it could work. But actually, we are not sure how these politicians are eager to give these powers. And those prefects to be appointed not on just being loyal, and not as those who have to collect revenues from regions to this vertical of corruption. So it's very mixed and very interconnected. I wish I could give you a clear answer, but no, not in this way.
Thank you very much. Please.
Môžem? Dobrý večer, ja som Hatala. Som troška starší. A nehačte všetko, prosím vás, na korupciu. Vy už nemáte prvý Majdan, Ukrajina. Tento národ veľmi veľa za ten čas si ako vytrpel. My tiež sme boli satelit sovietského spoločenstva a okrem toho sme mali ešte nad sebou aj Čechov. Vymanili sme sa. Prosím vás pekne, nikto vám nič nedá. Škoda, že ste nevyužili ten čas a svojich ukrajinských ľudí ste neposlali do sveta, aby sa vyškolili, prišli domov a oni by vám veľmi dobre teraz vedeli organizovať všetko. Škoda, že váš prejav nebol vyvážený, lebo vám ako bratskému národu pomáhame aj my, zbierame ošatenie jedlo a z času na čas, keď máme plné mikrobusy, posielame nezišne na Ukrajinu. Škoda, že ste nepovedali aj to, že koľko kolón prišlo z Ruska. Rusko není náš nepriateľ, my sme bratia. Áno, samozrejme je na určitej strane barikády, jak každý. Prosím vás, prajem nášmu ukrajinskému bratovi, aby bol veľmi rozumný, pevný, silný a určite má u nás pomoc. Ďakujem.
The first thing about corruption, I would say that we have some good cases already. Sorry, do you hear? Some cases we have already visible in our territory of Eastern Partners country. Just take Georgia. The first point that we need, political will. When Saakashvili came to power as a result of Revolution of Roses, he was quite decisive to cut all the ties and to dismiss all the old system institutions and to begin from the very start. That's why when he is now a governor in Ukraine, so many young politicians are trying to be with him, because only such crucial political step or cut could help us. I agree with you with that we should train our young leaders, we should take more in these European cases, and we do. For example, we do appreciate Slovak assistance. For example, I was a part of the organizers who organized the round table chaired by Slovak Republic in Visegrad Group in Ukraine. on decentralization, specifically on decentralization. And we share your concerns about it. But we see our problems, and we see, yes, what was the problem with our visa liberalization plan? Why it took so long time for us? We were supposed to have this track simultaneously with Georgia. And when in December 2015 there were 2 reports on Georgia and on Ukraine, Georgia was fine. They have delivered on all commitments under this visa liberalization plan on the first and second phase. What was about Ukraine? Only one part about anti-corruption. Because I was put it like flexibility of our leads. They wanted to have grasp on that. They wanted to have a kind of control over all systems. What was the problem? To create a National Agency for Prevention of Corruption. No problem. But somehow, it wasn't created in time. It was supposed to be operational in the mid of the 2015. What was the problem with creation of anti-corruption prosecutor? Other countries created, there was no problem. What is the problem with Ukraine? Because our prosecutor general wanted to control the appointment and the procedures executed by this anti-corruption prosecutor. But it's not about democracy. It's not about some civilized functions. So actually, goodwill, good political will, is the only answer to that. And maybe some crucial, you pointed out that you were also part of the socialist bloc and you know this problem. I agree with you. But maybe we are deeply integrated as a part of the Soviet mentality. And it's very difficult to extract from the minds of those who are in offices, in top offices of Ukraine. The only way to put new faces, to put new bright minds to the top institutions in Ukraine which deal with our areas. Maybe it was a little bit emotional, but I think it's the only answer to not the question, but it's a kind of remark.
Politics is all about emotions.
Дякую.
There were a couple of Pavel, and maybe then we will go back to the...
My name is Pavel Kosej. I'm International Secretary of KDH, Christian Democratic Movement. I was lucky enough to visit several times Ukraine in a couple of years now, and I see you have not easy situation, definitely. War or conflict with Russia, oligarchs, and so you have many enemies, but I dare to say that the most difficult enemy of Ukraine is lack of unity or lack of cooperation of the political representation or political elite. As your Ukrainian colleague said that several problems were caused somehow by politicians, and I believe that if Poroshenko, Yatsenyuk or Yulia Tymoshenko would be able really to cooperate and to do reforms for the sake of good of Ukraine, you might be in much better situation. So this is, of course, also in Slovakia, all over the world you have problem with the unity of politicians, but it is very sensible in the country which has serious problems. Okay, so if you want to say a word to that, you may. Second point, European Union is now going through hard times. Definitely the inner unity among the leaders of Union, I mean also national leaders, which make up European standpoints, it is really not easy, mainly vis-à-vis refugee problem. And of course, it was also mentioned that readiness of EU to accept new members is really, vis-à-vis this internal problem, very weak. And how is the popularity of EU among the Ukrainian citizens seeing this development? Because EU is no more so bright, I would say, internally and also from outside. My third remark, as I said, I visited Ukraine a couple of times, and I dare to say an observation that sometimes Ukraine representation was not so strong vis-à-vis EU to keep its identity. I say it in a very easy way. Their readiness to comply with EU issues was, so they wanted to be even more papacy, as we say, as it was needed. For example, concerning LGBTI rights, they were very easy to comply. And among four eyes, I could speak once with a lady from Tymoshenko party, and she told me, it's a disaster for us. We don't want to go so, in this direction. So I just would say, keep your identity as much as you can. And this will be your contribution to EU. And the last remark or question, Russia, Ukraine, and EU. We believe that Russia is not Putin and Putin is not Russia. So, for the future, how do you see if Ukraine would once become member of EU? Can you imagine that the relations between EU, Ukraine, being a member of EU, and Russia would be viable, would be, if it's conceivable in your view? Thank you.
We need another hour, I think.
I'll try to be brief. Unity of politicians. It's a right thesis, but we wish the same from the part of civil society, to see the unity of politicians. The core problem I see, maybe I would once more reiterate my thought, that I see that this flexibility of the elites is still strong. They try to keep not our own identity, but some post-Soviet identity, which is closely connected with corruption, with some kind of not open negotiations, and so on and so forth. And those three leaders you indicated, they were all represented in old authorities, in Yanukovych authorities. Let's remember Yatsenyuk, his ministerial post, about Poroshenko, his ministerial post, about Yulia Tymoshenko being a prime minister, and so on and so forth. So actually, they know the situation, and they know that mentality. And unfortunately, they still are inclined to use that mentality in new realities. So my answer is not maybe immediate remedy. We should search for new faces and new minds, because now this trinity is the remedy for Ukraine. Unfortunately, I'm quite sincere with you, because I would say, yes, we would be united and so on and so forth. No, not with these politicians, but some good steps we could achieve, even if there is a little compromise, but not unity as a whole political system. How Ukrainians see the European Union? I think it's the answer could be mixed to some extent, because we see that European Union is weak to some extent, even in trying to help Ukrainians. And we always try, not always, but in these circumstances, we try to measure European Union with the help to Ukraine. And we see its weakness even through this Netherlands referendum. It was quite clear to everybody in Ukraine it was not about association agreement as such. It was about internal issues, but it was triggered specifically, and Ukraine was like a scapegoat for that. But still, I think that more should be done on the side of European Union, even to be more visible in our countries, not in the center, for example, but in the regions, because a lot is done by European Union, by definite countries, by volunteers which are living in these countries. And thanks, Anna, for her help in her initiative with volunteers. I think more visibility should be as a part of strategic vision of the European Union, just to make Ukrainians more engaged. As I said, we are more optimistic just in terms of figures. Ukrainians want to be members of the European Union. It's about 53% at the moment. And it's higher a little bit from the 2013, it was 47. But I think that something should be done from the EU side as well, not only from Ukrainians. Keep identity. You are right that not always Ukrainian politicians are prepared to deal with the issues they are to deal. The only remedy to have those politicians which are more equipped to that, those who have normal education, who know how it works. For example, if you ask Ukrainian politicians what are the main stakeholders in the European Union, what is the motion of decision, what is European Council, EU Council of EU, and so on and so forth, not everybody will give you a clear answer on that. And it also influences the identity, how we deal with the European side. That issue of the LGBT, as you pointed out, that is also because of flexibility of Ukrainian elites. We're trying to, just referring to my colleague, many problems in Ukraine are created by politicians to have their own constituencies. Why Donbass was specific? Because for politicians, mafia or family, as they say about themselves, for them it's easier to control when the region is subsidized. You give subsidies, you are a good guy. So you can control the situation. And so the support for these people was quite high. The same with such sensitive issues like LGBT. So we are Orthodox in majority, and it's not easy way. But to explain the situation, it's not so dangerous and not so harmful as it is put by politicians. They also trying to earn their votes and their constituencies. And it's also a problem because every elections we have quite new law, except of having one electoral code with clear procedures how to make it more democratic. And every time they are going, for example, politicians from parliament are going to go to elections, they try to secure a kind of law with a kind of loopholes to make the results more beneficial for them. For example, with those so-called open lists, as it was just recently. So they're trying to play. We should just maybe tolerant to see new elites coming to places, to occupy those places which are occupied by old elite. That's my point. Russia-Ukraine, I think it's possible. It is not about Ukraine-Russia. We do distinguish sometimes Kremlin and ordinary Russians. Now only 33% of Ukrainians see Russia positively. And more than 57 or 54, I don't remember exactly, see it negatively. But from Russian side, the figure even more serious. 26% see Ukraine positively. And this size is diminishing. So actually, a lot of harm was done by Kremlin to our nations, but I think it's possible. Putin and his team, they are not just forever, and we do believe that the situation will change. Thank you. I should maybe address some of your remarks.
Thank you very much. There was one question now. I would give the microphone first to the man in the back, because he's already keeping the hand up very long, and then then we'll have a final question. Maybe we can combine, actually, because we are running a little bit out of time, so maybe we can combine these two questions. Yes, please.
Thank you very much. My name is Michal Krčmery. I'll switch back to more of geopolitical issues. It's been more than 2 years since Crimea has been occupied. It's been more than 2 years since Donetsk and Luhansk regions have self-proclaimed independence. The situation, formally there's a ceasefire, we have the Minsk agreements, but the situation starts to resemble the frozen conflict we can see in Georgia with Abkhazia and South Ossetia, the frozen conflict we have in Nagorno-Karabakh, or even the frozen conflict we have for the past 20 years in Moldova and Transnistria. Do you think Ukraine can successfully implement reforms and become a stable and prosperous country with having a frozen conflict, which, by the way, is in one of its most prosperous regions, Donbass? And the second question, if not, which is my honest opinion, what do you think that needs to be done in order to resolve the frozen conflict? Thank you.
Volám sa Ernest Geze. Bežní ľudia obyčajne len chcú sa mať dobre, ale nevedia, ako to urobiť. Nevedia, čo je potrebné. Tak ja si myslím, že je potrebné, a teda najprosperujúcejšie štáty sú právne štáty. Čiže tam, kde funguje právo. Ja sa chcem spýtať, či bežní Ukrajinci vedia, čo to znamená právny štát, čo to znamená spravodlivosť a či o tom politici hovoria. Napríklad pán prezident, či o tom hovorí, že bolo by dobré urobiť z Ukrajiny právny štát, alebo predseda vlády, alebo vôbec politici, či o tom hovoria. Ja viem, že oligarchovia sa tomu bránia, hej, pretože a bojujú proti tomu, ale teda politik má tu možnosť, že verejne hovorí a má možnosť verejne hovoriť, že či o tom hovoria. Ďakujem.
Frozen conflict, as you put it, yes, sometimes it becomes to resemble because of the situation we are squeezed in. Not just mention about Minsk agreements. This scenario was already explored, as you put it, in different countries of region of South Caucasus and Eastern Europe, in Transnistria, in Abkhazia and Ossetia. So it is what is prepared for Ukraine by Russia. The only thing which we could promote that European Union should help Ukraine with pressing Russia to comply with Minsk agreements. In full potential, not only to hold elections on basis of Ukrainian law, but to withdraw troops from this region. Just maybe try to provide with some figure. Now there are about 34,000 armed people on this territory from the side of separatists. Out of them, 7 are considered to be regular military forces of Russia. So basically, what we are trying to produce at the moment, maybe you have heard about military OSCE mission to this region, to hold elections and to make the control over the border of Ukraine and Russia. If it is possible, the situation could be resolved in a better way. If it is not, I think it would take more time to amend this situation. And just another example from Ukraine, not about Donbass, Crimea, the same scenario was already deployed by Russia in 90s. But it was prevented because authorities were more powerful at the moment. What was the problem about 2014? It was said by Foreign Minister of Russia Lavrov to Foreign Minister at the time Deshitsa in the elevator with no ears, with no recording. When Deshitsa asked him, "Why have you occupied Crimea?" Lavrov just put it simply, "You took over authority, we took over Crimea." Just as simple. So actually, there was a good room for maneuver for Russia because new Ukrainian authorities were not able to react adequately. At that time, if you look at the scripts of the National Security and Defense Council, Ukraine was able to deploy only 5,000 troops with experience ready to participate in combat. At that time, in Crimea, there was a deployment of Russian troops at Navy base around 20,000. So there was no parity. It was just a way to kill all our guys, and there would be the same result. And that would be a certain result. But so I think that it is not a front conflict yet. It is simmering conflict, and we still have our soldiers being killed every day. But I think the only way to restore the control over the border, thank you, and to withdraw all Russian troops. I think it's doable. It's doable, and we see some signals, but I think more pressure should be put by our partners. Just we are not capable enough to counter with Russia on equals. They have 1 million people, armed forces. We have 200 something. You know, it's quite impossible. And we know, and we just hear to the situation that there is no military solution to this conflict. But what we need, the first point, to keep on sanctions, because Russia is weakening with every new year and with every new month, and to try to impose such obligations to Russia to be also part of this negotiation process. It is not very easy for Russia because it is not officially part of the Minsk agreement. They say, okay, we are monitoring what they're doing with LNR, DNR. And we are not part of that. We just facilitators, to say so. But to impose the will of them to be part of this process under OSCE flag, under EU flag, or under UN flag, but it also needs some time, it needs some political will. There's no easy answer to your question, but it is not frozen conflict, and it would be not frozen until there would some kind of concessions on EU side. Legal state. When we turn back to declarations of our politicians, they all about that we want to have rule of law, about legal state in Ukraine. But sometimes when we see the deeds and the words, they differ quite extremely. But actually, I think that a legal state is the maybe preamble to all the reforms in Ukraine. It is stated clearly in our constitution at the moment that Ukraine is a legal state. But the problem is that we just trying to put it to elites maybe, but we are not got accustomed to live by law. And that is the problem. It also takes time. It takes time, so I encourage you to be more patient with Ukraine, and we also trying to be more patient with Ukraine because some good signs already are seen, and some good signs we want to see. And we have some incentives from authorities that these signs could be visible, maybe in short-term or mid-term perspective.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Gennad. This was really tough discussion and many questions. I have final question, which is like this 1 minute question. What do you think, what's the first thing comes to your mind when you believe that this will be the contribution of Ukraine into the West, I mean to the European Union and the neighborhood countries, and what can be the Slovak contribution to Ukraine? Just one thing which comes first to your mind.
I think 1 minute question is 1 million question. Ukraine contribution is already maybe not a contribution, but a sign that we shouldn't perceive security dimension as a separate for Slovakia, Slovak Republic, for Ukraine, for European Union, for NATO. Because we are quite glad, for example, that you have your eastern flank of NATO enhanced, but it doesn't influence positively our security dimension because we do not see instrument. So the only contribution that there is a shared security environment, and we should try to make some efforts in common. Why is it like original Visegrad 4+ initiative, for example, Ukraine was invited to be part of the battle group, which was created under Visegrad 4. But I think that security could be, after this conflict is done, I believe deeply that this conflict would be done. Maybe in mid-term perspective, Ukraine could be a good partner in providing security, not to be consumer, and we are not consuming that even at the moment, but to be a contributor to security. What Slovakia could have transfer of bright minds like Mr. Mikuláš with young people who have their experience in reforms done in your country, and to help Ukrainians, ordinary Ukrainians, maybe with information about European Union, with information about reforms you've done, and with your optimism about future of common European Union with England, with Greece, with other countries, overcoming all the problems with migration, with economy, and so on and so forth. So I think it's beneficial in both sides.
Thank you very much. I think with the optimism should be actually exported from Ukraine, or at least looking around the European Union. I think that there is more optimism at the moment in Ukraine than in the EU. On this note, I would like to thank you once again. The envelope with this 1 million is somewhere. I think the organizers have prepared it. Thank you once again for coming to Bratislava, sharing your thoughts and your insights into the questions we all have and carry with us. I'm especially seeing the news from our neighbor. And thank you to everyone who came and who contributed. And I wish a nice evening to everyone.
Thank you for being patient to listen to me.